Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to the book launch of Modern Humanism, Science, Ethics, and the Stewardship of Earth. I am so happy to have you all with me today. What we'll do is that I'm going to give you an introduction to the book, and in the next 30 minutes, I will start with a story and then some important thank yous. I'll give you the animating issues and the core themes and some of the case studies that I've used in the book. So let's begin with a story and some important thank yous. Ancient people learned how to predict the seasons, measured the duration of the years. However, the age of the earth remained part of stories that were mythic and romantic. It was only in the 19th century that science was applied to the problem. Lord Kelvin used assumptions about the earth's cooling from a molten state and estimated its age between 20 million and 400 million years. It was only 72 years ago, in 1953, that Claire Patterson, after 7 years of painstaking research, finally determined the age of the Earth with remarkable accuracy. His result, 4.57 billion years, plus or minus 70 million, was a breakthrough in geochronology. Refinements have only slightly adjusted his estimate. Patterson wrote that when he finally determined the age of the earth, he did not have the feeling of, look what I have done. Instead, he said that the discovery electrified my soul. True scientific discovery forces the brain to thunder, we did it. This recognized the enormous communal debt and obligation to the generations of seekers, creators, and discoverers who had built up the heritage upon which he made his determination for the age of the earth. The we did it applies to all creative endeavors, big, such as Patterson's determination of the age of the earth, or small, such as my synthesis of ideas in the book Modern Humanism. The we in the creation of this book owes its first immense indebtedness to the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of creative artists, scientists, and humanists who over millennia have contributed to human knowledge. They embody a spirit of agape, personified by selfless devotion to truth, beauty, and the making of a better life for all of us. As Lytton Strachey said, they are not dead, they are our immortal companions. So let me give you a taste of the case studies and themes of the book, just enough to spark your curiosity. The reason it took Patterson 7 years to measure the age of the Earth was that he relied on lead isotopes, which act like a clock. By tracing the decay of uranium into different forms of lead, he could calculate how long that process had been running, and from that determine Earth's age. But the challenge was enormous. The ancient isotopic signal he needed was incredibly faint. As Tim Lane explained with a metaphor, it was like trying to hear a whisper at a rock concert. The true signal of ancient lead was almost drowned out by the massive environmental lead contamination. It took Patterson 7 years before he could finally isolate the true isotopic signal. The process, however, also led Patterson to find that the use of leaded gasoline resulted in excessive and toxic lead in the environment. He wrote, "Humans have poisoned the biosphere with industrial lead." Dr. Herbert Needleman, who examined children's milk teeth, found that they had extremely high levels of lead. He wrote that for over 7 decades, millions of cars dispersed this toxic substance. The reason why leaded gasoline was used was that General Motors wanted a patented product to add to gasoline to prevent engine knocking and to allow the use of more powerful engines. And oil companies wanted gasoline, not battery power or ethanol, to power cars. General Motors and the US oil companies monopolized so-called research into the possible effects of lead in human beings. Their scientists, led by Robert Kehoe, stated that blood lead levels up to 80 micrograms per deciliter was normal. It took the CDC over 80 years to lower the maximum healthy blood lead level to 5 micrograms per deciliter. As leaded gasoline was finally phased out, look at the chart and see the dashed line going down. Blood lead levels also fell. See the falling black line in the chart. This clearly shows how wrong the industry analysis was. There is no normal level of lead in humans. Later studies confirmed not only the damaging neurological effects of lead on the brain, impairing cognition, impulse control, and emotional regulation, but also revealing a striking social consequence. Jessica Rice found that higher lead exposure in children correlated with the increased crime rates 22 years later. And this led me to one of the big questions that really drives the book. As Needleman asked, how did such a toxic substance gain approval to expose hundreds of millions of people? In addressing Needleman's question, one of the core messages of this book is the consilience, the binding together of science, the creative arts, and modern humanism. Humanism makes the moral choice to apply science's test of knowledge about all aspects of the universe and provides the environment within which science and the creative arts can flourish. Science is a learning process applied to all aspects of the universe that self-corrects through an empirical-based feedback loop. And the creative arts and emotion provide the spark that animate and drive scientific and humanist endeavors. This unity of science, modern humanism, and the creative arts equips us with a lens through which we can ask the deepest questions. First, how the world is. In what way did Patterson show that there was a modern surge in lead levels in the environment? Why did GM engineers insist, despite alternatives, that leaded gasoline was the only available fuel for cars? These are questions that science addresses, often tentatively. How do we know? What test of knowledge should we rely on? What do we humans know about our behavior and ourselves? This is then followed up with the second question, the moral choices we have in how the world ought to be. This is the question of should leaded gasoline be used? And then, what are the consequences and frameworks that, that arise when we act or fail to act on the is or the ought? If we know leaded gasoline is harmful, but decide the trade offs are worth it and ought to be used, then what are the consequences and frameworks we should apply? The book first looks at how the world is, using case studies illustrated here. The science of leaded gasoline, the cold fusion fiasco, two ascents of Everest, evolution by natural selection, and the role of chance. I'll now give you a preview of just one particularly interesting insight that emerged from the case studies centered around how the world is. Tourist climbers often pay between $50,000 and over $100,000 to be taken up Everest. In many cases, they are practically carried to the top by Sherpas. Tragically, many tourist climbers and Sherpas die in the process. To make sense of why people behave this way, the book looks at several dimensions: cognitive biases that distort judgment, insights from neuroscience, the influence of genes, cultural memes, and the subtle effects of priming. These perspectives together explain the powerful mix of motivations that drive such behavior. I will now give you a stunning example of the effects of priming. So, priming is about cognitive activation and a psychological process leading to unconscious influence. Kathleen Vohs conducted experiments exposing participants to money or money related stimuli, even monopoly money, or words relating to wealth, before they were given tasks to do. The effect was that people were unconsciously primed to act more selfishly, retreat from teamwork, and be less helpful. These experiments have since been replicated multiple times and confirm that priming can reliably shape behavior without our awareness. Daniel Kahneman called Vohs' experimental findings profound. This is because priming isn't just about money. Vohs' experiments remind us that the environment we are in can prime us in powerful, hidden ways. We are subtly conditioned, in this case, to chase images of success, whether keeping up with the Joneses or reaching the summit of Everest. As Nick Bullock wrote, tourist climbers are driven by the urge to want. Priming surrounds us with the cues that equate success to instant gratification, the summit selfie, the checklist holiday, the trophy destination. Our travels become less about experience and more about proof, images to display, stories to trade. These demonstrate how deeply we are conditioned to chase symbols of achievement rather than reflect on meaning. Priming subtly molds not just desires, but entire social narratives. Of course, how the world is also shows great humanist achievements. We have so much in common with our cousins, the bonobos, who literally make love, not war. The teamwork behind Tenzing and Hillary's first ascent of Everest. We eradicated smallpox. We launched the Voyager spacecraft. We deployed the internet and the free web. These are some of the amazing human achievements and our background that the book discusses. Well, in exploring how the world is, we should be aware of what science results in and what it is not. Science uses plausible reasoning and is open to self-correction. Science does not result in bombastic overconfidence or bravado driven by dogmatic moral fervor. But there are questions science cannot address. Normative, moral issues. These are our choices on how the world ought to be. Our choices are usually shaped unconsciously by upbringing, culture, tribe, or race, leaving us caged within implicit moral frameworks. Humanism helps us understand that life arose by chance in an indifferent universe. That indifference gives us the existential freedom and responsibility to decide explicitly how we ought to live. In discussing the fundamental moral choices modern humanists make, I contrast two case studies. Our response to the COVID-19 crisis, which led to at least 19 million excess deaths worldwide, and the successful eradication of smallpox by 1980. This highlights the fundamental building blocks of humanism, the moral choices about how we value life, organize collective action, and decide what kind of world we strive to create. Arriving at these fundamental ideas of how the world ought to be, modern humanism argues for the close compact, not a conflation, between is and ought. Humanism sees worldviews and life purposes as choices, informed by science but guided by ethics. As the philosopher Simon Blackburn put it, we craft our morality according to what we know about the world and ourselves. Science clarifies these assumptions. The age of the earth is important. For theologian Douglas Wilson, and I quote, "The issue is always what God said and not how old something is." But the age of the earth clarifies aspects of deep time. It lays the basis on which evolution has worked over billions of years and provides evidence for our ancient common history. In this way, ethics directs inquiry and evidence reshapes moral choices and beliefs. Then, based on how the world is and how we humans morally believe the world ought to be, we examine the consequences of and develop the frameworks from is and ought. The book synthesizes consequences and frameworks from is and ought using several case studies. I won't go through all these examples in detail here. The book expands on them fully, but together they illustrate the challenges we face, from how technology is shaped to moral responsibility in poverty to ecological neglect and the difficulty of global dialogue. Each case shows how our beliefs about the world and our choices shape human flourishing and the kind of world we want and wish to create. The case studies also show that some visions are deeply troubling. So many people hold Mark Zuckerberg and other tech titans as exemplars. But do we really want their vision of the world? Do they understand? Also, do we understand our common evolutionary and scientific and creative arts heritage? Our interconnectedness to nature and processes on Earth? The discussion of consequences and frameworks from is and ought continues, using Keynes's 1930 essay. Keynes imagined a future where we would be free of material scarcity, giving people the opportunity to focus on meaning, relationships, and flourishing. The discussion spans economic, social, power, politics, and educational frameworks and responsibilities. Crucially, humanism does not arrogate to itself delusions of a perfect or a best of all possible worlds. Utopias are grounded in unfalsifiable theories, ideologies, God or gods that justify any means in pursuit of purportedly better ends. The result of utopias is, as Stephen Kotkin says, the most terrible crimes become morally imperative acts. The book ends with a discussion of visions of possible futures. The Voyager spacecraft, launched in 1977, have now crossed into interstellar space, the farthest human-made objects from Earth. 35 years ago, in February 1990, Voyager 1 looked back from around 6 billion kilometers away, 40 times the distance between Earth and the Sun, and captured a tiny image of Earth hanging in the vast cosmos. Carl Sagan called this the pale blue dot, reminding us of our fragility and shared home. Can you see where Earth is in this image? I've actually cheated a bit. I made the dot a little bigger and for contrast in white. Otherwise, it is really difficult to identify. The Voyager and the pale blue dot case is used to highlight the difference between cleverness, our imagined superiority via technological prowess, and wisdom through understanding. If we look back, human history is often told through our tools, from the Stone Age blades in the Upper Paleolithic around 50,000 to 10,000 BCE, through to machines in the Industrial Age, and now digital and genetic technologies. But the tools only tell part of the story. They show what we could do, not what we understand. The striking part is that there has always been a lag between the development of our tools rushing ahead and deeper and wider understanding. Science and humanism are very recent understandings. The urgency of the book and our concerns arises because our technologies have given rise to catastrophic risks like climate change, and also this immense technological power, nuclear, genetic engineering like gain of function, emerging AI that poses existential threats. The challenge of our age is not greater focus on technological innovations. Here is one of the cleverest innovations we have arrived at. And you know, and I know, but we try to keep it hidden at the back of our minds. We have used nuclear weapons. These were not tests. And to dull our minds to the horror, we even gave the bombs innocuous names little boy, fat man. There is an urgent need to have our understanding not just keep pace with our tools, but to create the right ones and harness their abilities for planetary flourishing. The book contrasts the Kardashev scale, which measures civilizations by their energy consumption, with what I call the Sagan scale. Progress defined not by power, but by planetary flourishing and a possible far future of cosmic stewardship. I want to close this talk about the book by paraphrasing the mathematician T.W. Corner, who said, "The basic ideas of modern humanism are easy to understand. How else would a bunch of apes fresh out of the trees be able to find them? But modern humanism requires a lot of work to master and implement. After all, we're just a bunch of apes fresh out of the trees." So, this is the end of a rather long presentation. I know the book could have been better written. Some essential flow has been lost while editing it. The book synthesizes ideas already articulated by others, and I will set up a forum that can be used for an ongoing dialogue. But I wonder if this synthesis of forums will have any meaningful impact. As Daniel Ellsberg said, the odds may not be favorable, but perhaps the very act of asking these questions is itself part of shaping our future. As Albert Camus reminded us, the only honorable course for modern humanists is to stake everything on this formidable gamble.